still talking about strengthening the electoral process in the aftermath of the Ondo governorship elections. And joining us now is Malaki Ugwumadu, who is the president of the Committee for Defense of Human Rights. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
It's a one pleasure to be back with you again.
It's definitely very good to see you here in Abuja.
That's right.
Well, looking at the process that has gone on in Ondo State, what are the comments? Because I'm sure that your group must have monitored what happened in Ondo. What are some of the observations that they have and some of the areas for correction so that the process can be strengthened?
Yes, I think the first point is to say that the CDHR, Committee for Defense of Human Rights, was one of the accredited civil society organizations that observed the election. And we had about, even if we mobilize up to 400, we had about 100, deployed to the various local governments and polling units. By and large, the message is that indeed what happened was a contest. And given the Nigerian climate, such contestations are characterized by very convoluted strategies on both sides or across board to assess victory. But I think that on the part of INEC, our report showed that there were remarkable improvement or determination to ensure that previous concerns, previous inadequacies were taken care of, particularly regarding the early deployment of sensitive materials, the deployment of electoral officers, and, of course, the presence of the security agencies who were in strategic places. And I think what also made it an improvement was the enthusiasm on the part of the people of Ondo State to partook of that process.
There was actually enthusiasm. Some people thought that there was a low voter turnout.
I said enthusiasm on the electorate, that is, those who came out. You could see that as early as possible, many had started lining up in an orderly form. It is true, where you have an election for an entire state, for gubernatorial elections, if the average that was recorded in terms of turnout is what we had, then you can safely be talking of low turnout. But I was talking of the enthusiasm of those who participated in it. That way, it was difficult to deploy all the manipulative strategies, because what it meant is that vigilance at that point remained the eternal prize for freedom. And the people were quite decisive on it. You may have had the governor-elect commenting to the effect that he didn't know that he was going to win with that kind of margin. I mean, that clearly shows that the people resolved that this was the way they were going to go in the election.
But some people believe, I mean, I'm sure that you will also agree with them, that the electoral process is split. There are processes before the elections, there are processes on election day, and of course processes after the election. Looking at the processes, because for some political parties, particularly the PDP, they believe that the processes before the elections was what shortchanged them. How would you look at the processes before the election to ensure that there is a level playing field for everyone when they eventually get to election day?
My preliminary statement was that access to political power in Nigeria at the moment is through contest. If it is true contest, it stands to reason that each party will make efforts to undo the other. However, in the instant case, what played out objectively to the knowledge of every person was an internal, intra-party squabbles, so to speak, was an intra-party challenge by which the People's Democratic Party, unfortunately, the incumbent party in power, was unable to resolve on their flag bearer. And so we are not under the military government. Part of the democratization process in a constitutional democracy as we have it is that where such issues arise, you have the court to resolve it. Unfortunately for them, they were in that process when they were literally caught up with time.
Do you see a role for INEC in that instance?
Well, INEC usually, as an umpire, can do very little particularly when the issues become that of litigation. They must be bound by the outcome of the judgments. And it is immaterial whether the judgment came very early in time, which will afford the party the opportunity to reorganize and reposition themselves, or they come very close to. The important thing is that INEC is bound by the order of court or the judgments of court with respect to pre-election disputes. And precisely that was what happened. Now, I think that moving forward, the need has arisen to also improve the processes in such a way that even pre-election matters could be time barred. I mean, there must be a deliberate, because you cannot discountenance the argument of PDP. Because here was a party whose candidature was not hosted on the website of INEC. Here was a party who, like he even said, could not even attend the program organized by Channel. Here was a party who didn't do this, who didn't do that. I mean, being a contest, the only way you can, if you can conclusively talk about a level playing ground, irrespective of whether the problem came from the party itself, was when all the candidates have equal opportunity, not just in terms of platform, but in terms of time to deal with the electioneering process. That didn't happen here. But the question, the bigger question, which is the issue, is whose fault was it? It was the fault of the same political party that should change themselves. INEC was stuck as an umpire to do justice to all parties, and in its circumstance, all they needed to do was to respect the court order. If they have done otherwise, that also would have become a subject of further contestation.
Well, looking at election day now, we've addressed some of the issues pre-election, but looking at election day, you say that some of the processes show an improvement or a determination to improve on past processes by INEC. But then there have been accusations that there was voter inducement on that day in the full glare of security agencies, and that nothing was done about it. Did you observe that? Let
me talk of the first of the election date. It is not by conjecture. These are statutory provisions. The dates of election are statutorily determined. And if you move beyond it, you actually may infringe on the enabling laws. And that could be the basis for further contestations, as the case might be.
Even though some people argue that, that particular instance was not applicable to this case because they still had a time frame within which they could have moved.
Now, the issue of postponement is addressed by two sections of the Electoral Act 2010, Section 26 and Section 36. The latter has to do with the death of the candidate. The former has to do with emergency situations, security situations, situations that clearly would jeopardize a peaceful conduct of the election. In each of those provisions, the discretion of the electoral body, particularly with the former, is called to question. Now, the argument was the circumstance, the entire circumstance in Ondo State, such that the election management body ought to postpone the election. And in those two provisions of the sections, I imagine that they looked at it and found that those conditions do not exist. Even if the valid question of the time for the man who had just secured victory from court, less than 48 hours, as I imagine, became an issue.
Do you think that's something our laws can cure?
And I had made that point to say that the process of legislation is a continuous process that targets and focuses on improvement, just so that at the end of the day, the society is better organized. And how do you measure this improvement? It is a response to the challenges of nation building, including what we have witnessed at the moment. But by and large, I think there is a need to admonish political parties to also get their acts together. What happened in Ondo State seemed to be one that was carefully calculated to happen by factions of PDP themselves. As it turned out, it seemed to every Nigerian now who objectively observed what happened that, look, there were a lot of efforts right within that party to undermine the same party. And once that happened, you play into the hands of your opponents, and then victory is assured, as they say.
But looking at, I mean, because we're actually talking about, I asked you the first question about whether or not your group also observed inducement on election day, which is one area that a lot of observers, took issue with and said that happened in the glare of security agencies, and then nothing happened.
There was, and that's very unfortunate. There was that concern across board, reported by virtually all the observers. Now, what we cannot afford is to continue to look the other way when such complaints are lodged, when such allegations are made. Under Section 150 of the same Electoral Act 2010, the body is empowered to prosecute electoral offenders. One of such electoral offenses is the inducement of electorate with pecuniary benefit. And if this, as it happened, became a documented case, you will be sure, like you already had some of the contestants, say that they were going to challenge the elections because, as we know, under Section 134 of the Electoral Act, the grounds for the challenge of elections are clearly spelled out there.
Moving forward now,
yes.
I mean, that's definitely one area that INEC needs to look at very critically, because if you also observe that, and quite a number of people observe that, do you think that we should be hearing from INEC now in terms of what truly transpired on that day and the allegations of voter inducement, and perhaps from the security agencies?
God bless you. This is where I'm coming to. The business of apprehending criminal offenses is primarily that of the law enforcement agencies that were on ground. Now, it doesn't mean that a private person cannot arrest any person who is in the act of committing an offense. It doesn't mean that. But for the purpose of election, and given the huge number of deployments made by not just the police, other sister law enforcement agencies, it was expected that some of these infractions would have been nipped in the bud. Look, if it happens, as it was bound to happen, that one or two persons were arrested and the information moves as you also communicate with each other about collations to a unit, the tendency is that those who are in the practice will at least desist. But where such an arrest is not...
We'll come back and address that further, because some people say that was aided by the fact that the secret part of the open secret ballot system was missing, and that could have also been a collusion on the part of some of the members of INEC. But we'll take a moment now and we'll come back and discuss this matter a little further. You join us again.